What is up, everyone? Brandon Ferst, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first off the bench. Welcome into another edition of In the Paint, our weekly college basketball show where we break down everything that goes on throughout the week of college basketball that there is, that as we get closer to March. And when I say we, it's myself and my co-host and partner, Raider Jim Martinez. You can find him on Twitter at Raider Jim 1090. Mr. Martinez, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing good. The our 100th of an inch of rain that we got for the weekend forecast is done. It looks like the skies are blue, the sun's out. It's Friday, and we're talking basketball.
Amen. It's a great time for college basketball. Of course, we do have the COVID situation looming. It's similar to that dark cloud. We talk about that 1/100th of an inch of rain. Well, that's not the case in the COVID situation. They might be up to a foot at this point. But Raider Jim, you have a bit of a full, or at least a rundown of what's been going on in the COVID side of things when it comes to college basketball.
Yeah, the COVID has been, as we all know, for now, it's been 11 months. It was actually on the 10th of February 2020, they had 12 confirmed cases of COVID. And look where we are today with the numbers. And it was just about 10 months ago, 9.5 months ago, that they were getting ready to wrap up conference tournaments, go into March Madness. And that's when whistles started blowing, players were getting pulled off the courts, and all of a sudden there was no more March Madness that was going to happen for the first time in history that I'm aware of. So where are we at now with COVID? The NCAA has done a great job of keeping things going. Kudos to all the universities who have either had to shut down programs, put programs on postponement, all the rescheduling that's been done. It has been quite a nightmare for all the universities and schools, and for the players to stay, mentally keep themselves into the game. So where are we at right now? So on this was starting as of last week. UMass decided that they were going to have to pause everything. That was effective Sunday the 7th for 14 days. So UMass out for 14 days. Florida, Tennessee, Georgia, Texas A&M basketball games were postponed last week. Coming up, Siena men's basketball team has paused activities. They are not going to play. They were supposed to play on tonight and tomorrow. They have been postponed, their games against Canisius. DePaul at Xavier postponed yesterday. The biggest one is Baylor has been postponed again. Now, that was on Monday they made the announcement. They postponed the game against Oklahoma that was supposed to take place on Wednesday the 10th, but they have also now postponed tomorrow's game against Texas Tech, Monday's game on the 15th against West Virginia, and then another game against West Virginia on Thursday the 18th. That's 4 games for the Baylor Bears that aren't going to be played. And you have to wonder, and it was talked about during one of the games I watched during the week, is that good or is that bad? Do the postponements mean well rested and your team can come out and you're going to be in better shape when you retake the court? Or does it mean that downtime is going to make players a little lethargic, a little rusty, and a little harder to get back into the game? So for the number 2 ranked Baylor Bears, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Well, I don't know what your feeling is on that.
Obviously, as always, when we talk about these things, first and foremost, health and safety of everyone involved is paramount to, whatever we want in March or whatever these programs are going to do now. But it's becoming now, and I think we've talked about it really from the beginning, it's becoming a war of attrition for a lot of these schools. Who can weather this better? Obviously Gonzaga it's almost kind of like the timing, right? There's going to be injuries throughout a season, or there's going to be hiccups throughout a season. You just maybe hope that they're at the right time. You hope that maybe they're mid-season or early season, to the point where by the end of the season you're playing good basketball, or whatever you're doing, to the point where you get to that playoff and you're able to get rolling because you're playing your best basketball. It's kind of like right now, I feel like everyone's going through this. It's a timing, like you said. Is it good right now? Is it a nice refresher for the gauntlet that they're about to have to roll through? Because when you get through 4 or 5, 6, 7 of these games, eventually you're going to get into March and it's no longer, oh, okay, we can just, we'll get them tomorrow. There is no tomorrow when you get into March. So for Baylor, we'll find out how the rust has dealt with it. I think the biggest part of this is how quickly and what they're doing right now with their downtime. Obviously, they can't practice or whatever, but are they breaking down film? Whatever the situation is, you have to make the most of this situation that has been given to them. We saw with Villanova, who pretty much went through essentially what Baylor's going to go through, a month-long break, that they're not going to lose their ranking, especially considering being now one of only two undefeateds. I can't imagine the pollsters drop Baylor. So they're going to pretty much essentially be the 2 seed for at least the foreseeable, or not the 2 seed, excuse me, the 2 ranked team for the foreseeable future. We'll see how this affects them when they come back, because a bit of a difference with Villanova is Villanova came back to the Big East, which normally is kind of up there, but this year has been very up and down. It's been Villanova and kind of everybody else. That is not the Big 12. The Big 12 is full of sharks that are ready to take a bite out of the big shark that is Baylor. So we'll see how that rust factor goes. I'm excited though, because we are going to see really Baylor come back and have to deal with a tournament schedule
Right.
early on.
It's going to be curious to see how they play this, because this will mean that going into the last weekend of February, they have 4 conference games that they've missed. And they're right on the doorstep of going into conference tournament time. So do they make up those games? Do they postpone those games? It won't, as you said, it will not ruin their ranking. It won't ruin their seeding. That's for sure. But those are important games to miss. I mean, Big 12 is loaded, and to miss out on those competitive games and then possibly get thrown into, West Virginia, I should say, has dropped a couple. And so that might make them more middle of the pack when they do the seeding and the ranking for that conference tournament. And if that's the case, wow, those are 2 games you're not going to play West Virginia. You'd hate to have to face them in the opening round.
Yeah. And I'll throw another, Kansas. I mean, I don't care what Kansas has done this year. They have talent. They're fantastically coached. They're prepared. Might not be the most talented, dominant Kansas team ever, but they're still lurking around. It's really, really unfortunate, but how this is handled is going to be a big part of who wins the national title this year. And we will see who weathers that storm as we get closer and closer to March. Because like you said, I don't think this is over. I don't think Baylor's the last team to get kind of snake bitten by this. And B, what does Baylor do? Because I'll be honest, I don't know what number they would end at in terms of games played. But I mean, if it's 24 games, I don't think 20 to 24 games, I think will be just fine with them going into the conference tournament. I don't want to see Baylor, their top players blow out their hamstrings or get hurt because they have to play 8 games in 12 days to get it caught up with everything. I don't know if it's absolutely necessary, but I'll tell you what, the teams that are on that schedule for Baylor, they're going to want to sit there and say, hey, we would like to build our resume by taking a shot at the big boys. So a lot to deal with on the horizon, but Baylor, first and foremost, got to get back on the court. Everything else will then figure itself out.
Yeah, and if they do reschedule this and keep it as it is right now, I have to say that's a pretty attractive schedule. 2 back-to-back games against West Virginia. Those would be good games to see. So that's happening in the West Coast Conference. Of course, they are just riddled with COVID. Santa Clara is out. Gonzaga was supposed to play Santa Clara last night. That didn't happen. They're supposed to play, Santa Clara was supposed to play Portland tomorrow night. That's not going to happen. Gonzaga has had to shuffle the schedule the last couple of weeks. They moved up the BYU game earlier this week than what it was supposed to be. Last week, they had to bring in, I think it was Pacific is who they ended up playing. And St. Mary's is also have had a couple games that have been postponed. Miami, North Carolina is another one. The Howard's men's basketball team, Howard University, has just suspended the whole thing for the rest of the season.
Wow.
So they are out completely. And the Big Ten has decided that they are going to relocate their conference tournament, and they are going to play it in Indianapolis, where they're going to end up doing the entire NCAA men's tournament, which is probably a smart move.
Yeah, makes sense. The less travel, the better. You can, if you're in the Midwest, maybe if if you're the Pac-12, okay, maybe that doesn't make sense. But yeah, Indiana, that's as good as any, especially considering not quite sure the situation fans wise, but it will be at small capacity. So you're not really worried about, can this building support a Big Ten audience or, fan base, blah, blah, blah. So
Right.
everything right now, I think, for these teams and conferences needs to be getting to March the best possible way. But moving on, Raider Jim, of course, alluded to the West Coast Conference. If you are watching on the live stream, thank you obviously so much. The interview that we had, myself and Raider Jim, with former Gonzaga Bulldog from 1997 to 2000, he was there with Gonzaga. Matt Santangelo. That video, that interview will be dropping Saturday morning, 10 a.m. If you're listening to the podcast or watching the video will already be out. So make sure you go check that out. But it was absolutely fantastic. First of all, because it was the first time us two had an interview with someone that we both, at least I remember, and I know you obviously very familiar as well, but I remember the team that he was on and, everything he was able to do. Matt Santangelo, we got a chance to talk with him for a good 40 minutes. And it was very, very impactful, very interesting. But what were your takeaways from that interview with Matt Santangelo?
He very much is representative of the Gonzaga program to me. Again, he was part of the original Bulldog team that put Gonzaga on the map. Those were the guys that made that great Cinderella run, the 1998-99 season. And what I really appreciated, or what was exciting, if you will, it's one thing to talk to somebody and get their opinion, to speak to a reporter, to talk to an analyst. But when you talk to somebody who had the jersey on, who was on the court, and there were times it was almost as if you saw his eyes roll up and look towards the ceiling. And you can tell 22 years later, he can recall it like it was yesterday. And just to get that energy from him still and to realize the passion he has, you could sense the excitement of the victories that he recalled. And you could sense I don't want to say disappointments, but you could see where it impacted him on the shortcomings, the loss to Connecticut and they were that close, or maybe his own personal performance where he realizes he gave all he could, but maybe a couple of his shots didn't land like he thought they might. So just overall, I mean, it was a fantastic interview and really appreciate his time.
Definitely. Yeah. And like I said, please make sure you go check that out on Saturday, 10 a.m., YouTube and Facebook, First Report, FERST. And for me, it was, you kind of alluded to it with the kind of total recall. I mean, everything. When I was kind of getting my questions or my thoughts ready for it, I was thinking about the Stanford game in 1998 or 99. I believe it was the 99 season. So it was so
Yes.
99. And I was trying to find, maybe little things. Okay, I might need to maybe jog his memory on this. You never know. It is 20 years. That was obviously not the case. I guarantee you he would probably remember his junior year game against, Pacific. If you really wanted him to, he had that great recall. And one of the best parts about it is what he's been able to do. And not only that, but all of or at least a high majority or a high percentage of former former Gonzaga Bulldogs who have made Spokane their home, and not only made it their home, but enrich the community. Obviously, Matt Santangelo, he is the executive director of Hoop Fest, Spokane Hoop Fest, which is, as we found out, I didn't really know too much about it, the largest 3-on-3 tournament in the world. Just an absolutely diverse amount of people, not only what they do for the basketball community, but he had they said $50 million economic impact to the city of Spokane, which is just absolutely amazing. Obviously, in a time that we have 2020, everyone talking about small businesses, what better to, kind of take care of a whole community in one fell swoop. That is coming up later in June. We'll be keeping an eye on that and making sure that you are all informed on that. But that was just something that jumped out to me. Obviously, I know the Gonzaga side of basketball, right? You know Mark Few, that stuff. But as somebody, you have, have had children who went there and are very intimate with the culture and what they want to do off the basketball court.
Right.
that's kind of secondary to them. And I felt like he had the perfect attitude and the representation of what Gonzaga wants their graduates and their adults and their graduates to be.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, that is indicative of what you will find on the campus of Gonzaga.
Exactly. And it doesn't help that they're really, really good at basketball, especially this year.
Doesn't hurt.
It does not hurt. And that's a perfect little segue to Raider Jim. Obviously, we already alluded to it, a big Gonzaga Bulldog fan. And in case you haven't noticed, they are at the top of the mountain. And really, with Baylor going on a bit of a, COVID break, they're going to be up there kind of fighting by their lonesome for a bit. But give us a little bit of a rundown of what we've been seeing going on with the current Gonzaga Bulldogs.
Yeah, when you go into the season and the preseason polls come out and they have you at number one, it's that double-edged sword. That's fantastic. We've drawn so much attention to us that we are number one. But then you spend the entire time looking over your shoulder and watching your back, because of course everybody wants to knock you off the top of the mountain and play king of the hill. And they have been able to weather the COVID storm. They've only missed one or two. They've rescheduled a lot, but they are still hanging on to that number one spot. They're playing well. Maybe on the betting angle, they're not covering the spread to the favor of some, but they're winning the games. The game against BYU the other night was another good example. They played well. They got off to a good lead. They never relinquished the lead, and they just hung in tough. I think they ended up. They actually beat the spread that day. That was a.
I was going to say that was the one. I had them at 11.5, and they got the job done at 12. But with 5 minutes to go, I mean, they were up by 20, and it got a little dicey there towards the end. And obviously, if you're not betting on those big spreads, you don't think a 12-point, 11-point difference is huge. But
yeah,
in the eyes of a lot of us, that was massive. But yes,
I think their biggest challenge right now is the COVID situation in the West Coast that we alluded to and talked about briefly, and the games that they may still miss or have to reschedule. And of course, then you're going to have the outsiders and the prognosticators who say, well, it's already the West Coast Conference. So what that they dominate that, but now it's going to be, they're already just in the West Coast Conference. And now look, St. Mary's is sick. Santa Clara is not playing. USD, the local program here, is in a shambles right now. I can't even recall the last time they played. So, and when I say in a shambles, that's what I mean, scheduling wise and being able to get the games in, not a remark about the team at all. So, but Gonzaga, I think they are going to be fine going into March. Just keep knocking on wood that they should end up the number one seed and pack their bags, get to Indianapolis, and let's see if we can take care of business.
Exactly. And I know that obviously the West Coast Conference isn't a Power 5 and might not even be considered a mid-major this year compared to what's everything going on kind of out of their control. But I don't know anybody who could sit there and look at Gonzaga no matter what and not say this is the best team. I think the fact they didn't play Baylor obviously is unfortunate, but it is what it is. And it's a little ironic at this point that, both of those teams, obviously Baylor is dealing with their situation now. We kind of alluded to it back then that if we have to give up November game to see these two go at it in March, right, we'll gladly do that. And I think that's still the case. But Gonzaga staying at the top. But I'll tell you what, the rest of the top 10 was it was a lot of shuffling. 40% of the top 10 has been shaken up. Iowa, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Texas all fall out of the top 10 as Illinois, Texas Tech, Virginia, and Missouri all move into the top 10. For me, the first one that jumps out to me is obviously Iowa. This was a team that was, I believe, up preseason number 3 or maybe even number 2, depending on where you looked. Luka Garza, obviously. Once again, we're seeing that Big Ten schedule starting to cut into people, starting to really kind of beat up on these good teams, how that's going to go. And then kind of as well with Texas, the Big 12 side of it, another team that's just kind of, it seems like that a big lion, right, has a kill. but there's 15 hyenas running around. Well, they're just kind of snipping at their heels. Eventually, Texas kind of started to kind of fall over and have fallen out of the top 10. But what are your thoughts on the shakeup? Really, I would say the biggest weekly shakeup we've seen, I believe, this year.
Yeah, I'm still scratching my head every time I look at the weekly poll when it comes out, because you see things like Rutgers makes an 18-point jump and they're back to number 25. And I'm not sure what the accomplishments were that warranted that type of a jump. I mean, I'm glad for them. The Rutgers program, both you and I were high on that program early on in the season. Wisconsin's down to 21. Tennessee has dropped from 11 to 16. West Virginia, it's like watching a bunch of stocks that nobody can really decide if they're going to be profitable or not, because West Virginia was up inside the top 10 when they played Gonzaga, if I'm not mistaken. And then they dropped down, and they were dropping down rapidly. And now they have moved back up to the number 14 spot. Texas, as you already mentioned, they're down to, they went from 6 to 13. Oklahoma, who was making a good run, and but both they and Alabama, they're right one on top of the other now. Alabama's at 11 and Oklahoma's at 12. Virginia on the move up, and I do like Virginia, and I like, and Houston. Houston has dropped now down to the 8th spot. So there's no margin for error on the rankings right now. It seems like as much as they're being very generous to the Gonzagas, the Baylors, and even the Villanovas, while Nova stayed at 3 for so long, they're not giving you room for error. Lose a game and you're going to drop 2-3 spots. So we'll see how it's going to play out for the rest of the regular season.
And I think that's really indicative to outside of, I mean, the overall 1 and 2 spots. I mean, obviously those are both 1 seeds. I think everything else is up for grabs. I think we've seen it with kind of the fluctuation. You mentioned Villanova right there at the 3, and it's, believe me, it's not science. It's not, 1 through 4 gets that 1 seed. It's very kind of obviously up to the heads in the room at the moment. But it was interesting to kind of see how this fluctuation, you talked about kind of the way the stocks, it's similar there. And I think that's been indicative of what we're going to see in these tournaments, these conference tournaments. Everybody is going to kind of go into it, whether you're on the bubble or not. You have to figure that every win and every loss, you're not stuck, right? Like you go into, say, the semifinal of the Big East is Villanova. Well, you're not going to stay at whatever you are. You're either going to win and move up, or you're going to lose and drop, because it's so unsteady and
Right.
so kind of there's so much parity around. Really, really going to be a lot of fun. And for people who like college basketball, one of the best parts about it is March Madness, emphasis on the madness. As long as it's not your team or maybe that bracket buster for you, you want to see the chaos. Most underdog teams are cheered for in those neutral venue sites. But 2 newcomers to the AP poll we're going to touch on. Obviously, USC up to number 20. They are 16-3, rather quietly for a Power 5 school, although the Pac-12 is hardly a basketball power. But another one that jumped out, and I'll give this first over to Raider Jim, but it's Loyola Chicago, 17-3. They've won 10 in a row. They're up to number 22 in the country. I believe there are a lot of Loyolas. But I believe this is is it Sister Margaret or Sister Mary who?
Yes.
From the couple 3 or 4 years ago when they made the Sweet 16 or Elite 8. Okay, so it is the same team. Out of the eight or 10 Loyolas running around, whether it's Marymount or, anyways, what are your thoughts on the Loyola of Chicago?
There it is. There they are, the mid-major school, if you will, that has come onto the scene and quietly worked their way to the top of the Missouri Valley standings and worked their way into the top 25. Now, the one thing I will say is, interestingly enough, you and I were just talking and singing the praises of Drake. And so Drake at 10-1 in conference play and 19-1 overall, and spent 1 or 2 weeks in the top 25. I think they were at number 25. They end up losing to Valparaiso, and what happens? They're out of the top 25, and that's going to be the matchup of the week. I think they play tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. It's going to be Loyola Chicago against Drake. That is probably going to be the game that tells you who wins the Missouri Valley Conference.
Yeah, I agree. And we've seen a lot from Drake, and obviously we kind of touched on it before the podcast. I don't know if it's the top 25 curse, or the podcast curse, or the first time we talk about him, the next week they go and kind of falter. But they did, of course, lose to Valpo. So obviously it took a while for them to get, I think, 17, 18-0. They finally busted in the top 25. We talked about it. One loss and you will go down, falter. But this is a big game, obviously, not only for Loyola Chicago, but for Drake to kind of show everybody, hey, we can still be here. And as awesome as I think it's going to be, that game, to figure out who is the regular season champ, I just hope, obviously, we can get a conference championship where, with that as the championship game. Obviously, if that is the case and both teams kind of hold serve, no matter who wins tomorrow, but if both teams, kind of hold serve the rest of that, you'd have to imagine they both get in. If Drake's been around the top 25 and Loyola Chicago is in the top 25, I'd have to imagine their RPI would be able to get them as an at-large. But still, it'd be a heck of a championship, knowing that both of those teams want to have that banner. Both of those teams want to be the conference championship. Regular season's great, but at the end of the day, you want the tournament. You want to be able to cut down those nets in the conference tournament, and it's really a perfect springboard into NCAA tournament in terms of the scheduling.
Yeah.
Now, maybe this year it's different because they're playing a lot more either back-to-backs or 2 and 3 days. So, okay, that would change things. But normally, the conference tournament is the first time, since your preseason tournaments, that you're pretty much playing back-to-backs. And obviously, when the NCAA tournament rolls around, it's 2 and 3 days, having those, 64 into 32 and 16 into 8. So very, very interesting in a situation where, for USC, I'll move on to USC, just kind of give, this is Andy Enfield. If you remember Andy Enfield, you might be thinking, why is that name familiar? Obviously, he was the head coach for, was it Slam City or Alley Oop City, was Florida Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
Back in 4 or 5, 6 years ago, I remember they beat the Aztecs in a tournament game. But he has since moved to USC. He's been there for the last 5 or 6 years, and he's been a top recruiter. USC finally having, one of those years where it's all coming together. It's unfortunate because everyone else in the Pac-10, Pac-12, outside of UCLA, is having a down year. It's really UCLA and USC is taking care of UCLA. The big part of this team is the big freshman. Power forward, plays the 4 or the 5, Evan Mobley. More than likely going to be a top 5 pick in the NBA draft, assuming he comes out, but you would have to imagine he would. He's really kind of taken over, a big body in the middle. And for me, that's what I think USC's always kind of missed. They've had big bodies, but they've never had big, kind of round bodies. They might be more length big than anything. And sometimes, you need that girth, the Sean Mays back from, the North Carolina days, just the big guy to just post up underneath and just box everybody out. That's what he's been able to do. Andy Enright getting not only the players in, but they're buying into his style. The thing with USC, though, is because the Pac-12 is so bad, they are really in a no-win situation. I mean, obviously you keep winning, fantastic, you'll work your way up. But unless it's, a UCLA or, that's about it. It's going to go down as a bad loss. This is probably about as bad as the Pac-12 has been and it's been bad for a little bit. So, it's kind of at the bottom, and it's really unfortunate. But as long as USC continues to hold their business, I think they can get themselves possibly, I think maybe to a 3 seed. Once again, that's winning out and winning your conference tournament and maybe getting some help. But now that they busted into the top 25, I think they keep doing what they need to do. But once again, one loss to Washington State, and you might go from top 25 to the bubble really quickly, so.
You said it about the Pac-12. I mean, when was the last season that you looked at the top 25 and you see one team and it just got in and it's at number 20?
Yeah, and it's
looking down and seeing Oregon. You're just looking down and seeing Stanford and UCLA. You see 2 or 3, 4 names. Maybe they're not in the top 20. Maybe they're not in the top 15. but there's a group of them down there, and you know that that's going to be a multiple entry into the NCAA tournament, and that's not how it's shaping up right now.
No, and you just kind of look at it, just to see a Power 5 team be 17-3 and just now break into the top 25. I mean, that's, I know UCLA was kind of there towards the back end of the last couple of weeks. USC knocked them out, but as a Trojan fan myself, as I have my little USC my desk banner there. Obviously football is number one, but whenever we can get some help with the basketball side of things, that's great. I keep going back to the OJ Mayo days. That was kind of the last time USC,
Right.
and believe me, we paid for that too. That was the pretty much the Reggie Bush saga of the basketball program, but we didn't get a national title in our efforts there. But moving on to the let's see, player spotlight of the week. This is a senior from Villanova, Colin Gillespie, a guy who's been at Villanova for quite some time, obviously a Jay Wright disciple. Big opportunity for him to finish his career with a high note. Obviously has a national title to his name, was on that Villanova team. He was a big surprise to stay. Obviously, I was a little surprised to see his name not on the top 80 in terms of the top basketball prospects. I'll be honest, I'll be the first one to admit it. I'm not a huge NBA fan, so me kind of projecting players from college to the NBA, it's a little different. In the NBA, it's a lot of potential. They will go after a 19-year-old who they know won't touch the court for 2 years, just knowing he'll have higher potential than a Connor Gillespie. But I look at Gillespie as somebody who could go out and be a glue guy, be a guy like Draymond Green, maybe not in terms of the level where he could be, but a guy who's going to go out and fill up the box score, give you 10 points, 7, 8 assists, a couple steals, play good hard-nosed defense. This is a guy I think that can probably going to be undrafted, might have to go overseas for a bit or maybe play in the G League. But Connor Gillespie, Colin Gillespie, will be somebody that I'm keeping my eye on, obviously, as a Villanova fan. He will be a big part of whether or not this team can win another national title. Jay Wright has talked about the senior leadership and how he's needed that. Sadiq Bey is obviously gone after last year. This is all him now. He is the top dog here. What are your thoughts on Gillespie?
Solid kid. I mean, he's just a little bit like a Matt Santangelo. He's that kid that's going to come in. First year, he didn't start but one game, but then second year, 35 games, 31 games. He's giving you 30 minutes, 34 minutes on the average. Same again this year. He's one of the scoring leaders on the team. And he's also, I think he just got named to the Naismith list.
Yes.
Yeah. So he and one of the sophomore teammates of his also. So, kudos to him. He's just that solid kid you want on the team. I know I was just reading up on him before we went on, and, his dad's a police officer. You can just tell he's got that family thing is probably just instilled in him, and he's got that character, which is probably another reason he stuck with the program as well. But to have that national championship sensation and credit on your resume, what a great thing to do in your college career, especially so early on. And I think you're right. I think he is probably going to end up in Europe before he's going to end up in the NBA. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. As long as he continues to play and enjoys it, that's what's most important.
Amen. I mean, I'll tell you what, it would not be the end of the world. Go get yourself a hell of a degree from Villanova, a really good institution. Go 8-10 years, go play Italy, Spain, Israel, all over, Turkey, pretty much kind of jet set and make a good living. Come back. I'm sure if anybody ever screams coach in a next life or 10, 15 years down the road, I'm sure he's not thinking about that anytime soon. But this is a guy that screams, in 10 to 15 years, we see, oh, look who takes the job at Temple, or, one of those kind of, maybe Big Five schools there in Philadelphia. We shall see.
You even see him gravitating back to Villanova.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, who knows? Maybe he, Jay Wright gets a hold of him and says, hey, if you don't want to go to Italy or wherever overseas, the graduate assistant spot's right there. I could see him, being one of those young and up and coming coaches early on at, 31, 32 years old, taking a young 15 or 16 seed in the tournament going, oh, that's where he is now, and going, oh, he just also busted my bracket. But
Right.
we shall
Yeah, I
see
don't think
there.
his playing days are far from over, and I don't think he is far removed from the NCAA once his playing days are finished.
Amen. Yeah, it's sky's the limit for him. Maybe not the exact route you would expect. Some of these other guys talked about, like Evan Mobley, top-notch guy, blah, blah, blah. But Gillespie's a little different. You stick around for 4 full years there at Villanova. I think he understands the situation, and believe me, it's not the worst situation to be in. Go get yourself a degree and everything else in front of you. Moving on to the last bit of news
About
is, of
those
course,
Aztecs.
sorry. Yes, the Aztecs have really been in a situation now. I'm just going to pull up their schedule. They need to hold serve. They got the job done against San Jose State the last couple games. It was once again a no-win situation. You expect them to go out and beat a team like San Jose State. They did that. They got the job done. Now they look ahead, and they can't really look ahead. I don't want to make it seem like that, but coming up on the horizon will be Boise State. That is the game, February 25th, February 23rd, and February 25th. The two of the 4 best teams in the conference. San Diego State has worked themselves up to 16-4, probably on the bubble. They'd like to think that they're on the other side of the bubble, but you have to imagine until they call your name on Selection Sunday or you win the Mountain West tournament title, you have to expect that they are going to need to put everything they can on the resume. And I'll tell you what, if they can get just 1 or even 2 wins against Boise State, that would be fantastic. Excuse me. Before that time, it does look like they are going to have to go through 2 games with Fresno State. Once again, you don't want to overlook those teams. Possibly Colorado State tomorrow, but once again, these schedules are very difficult. I can't tell if I'm looking at an old schedule that's been postponed, but I do know they'll be playing Fresno State on the 18th and 20th, and then Boise on the 23rd and 25th. Fresno State, obviously not the big team that Boise is, but Fresno State has something Boise doesn't, and it's familiarity. That coaching staff came from San Diego State. They kind of came through the Fisher Dutcher way. They've done it that way. They're emulating the way San Diego State is doing business. So that will be very interesting. That's kind of, Fresno State's national championship game, if you will. They're going to think that they can still go out and win the Mountain West and kind of shock the world. That's fine, but this is kind of their chance, and that coaching staff's chance to kind of throw the gauntlet down and say, you know what, we are on the level with San Diego State as well. And for San Diego State, they have to be very cautious. This is a coaching staff that knows them very well, or at least knows the way they're going to be coached very well. Don't overlook this team on your way to Boise State, because that will be disastrous going down the road.
So one comment and a couple questions. The comment is, to put things into perspective, we talked about the Baylor schedule and that they've missed, they've lost the Oklahoma game or postponed it. They've postponed the 2 upcoming West Virginia games. And then there was a 4th game in there as well. When you talk about the Mountain West Conference, this is it. This is the last 4 games before it goes into the tournament. The tournament's actually going to start on March 10th is supposed to be the first round of the Mountain West Championship tournament. So with that said, 4 games left, 2 on the road, 2 at home. The last 2 against Boise State are here at home. That's a good thing. And because they only have to go to Fresno, the travel is going to be a little easier for them as far as getting back and staying relaxed. But if they drop one of those 4 games, or they will have 4 losses in the conference. How do you think that affects their seeding in the tournament and overall?
I think, look, if you fall to Fresno State, if you fall to Air Force in the conference tournament, without beating Boise State twice, I think anything, you lose to Boise State twice, and then maybe you get to the conference tournament and then lose to Boise State. And I think that maybe ends you up at maybe like 21-7, 21-8, what in that area. I think they'll sweat out Selection Sunday, but I think they could be. I don't think they'll be one of the first four, but I think they could be a 10 seed, an 11 seed. But I'll tell you what, if you, like I said, if you falter to Fresno State, and then, and I have to correct myself, it's actually the 25th and 27th that San Diego State will be playing Boise State. But
That's correct. Yeah.
yeah, so there's all kinds of, like I said, there's all kinds of craziness when you look at the schedule, but I can confirm that. That's going to be interesting. Are you in a situation where outside of Boise State, those two games, and really until you get to the conference tournament championship, assuming they get that far, you can't lose. Assuming you don't beat Boise State twice. I think if they handle their business, beat Boise State twice, the highest I think they can get to is 8. I don't think they can get anything higher than an 8 seed, unless something crazy happens. And I can maybe walk that back a bit because I talked about it earlier. It is kind of a lot of changing parts, but for San Diego State, some of their losses, I can't get over that Colorado State game. If I'm in that committee's room and I look at the way they lost Colorado State, good team, Colorado State, but they were up by like 32 points at one point in that game. It's just, that nags at me. And it's not great, but a 10 seed, I think, is where I would put my money. An 8 seed would be, I believe, their ceiling, maybe a 7 if some crazy stuff happens ahead of them, but I don't see that happening. I could see them as a 9, 10, and I think they'll be okay with that. At this point, you have to feel, just give me a ticket, right? Like, I don't care who I have to dance with first. I just want to be invited.
Yeah, they've got their work cut out for them. I just pulled up the conference schedule. Utah State's sitting at 14-5 with 11-2 conference in the conference. Boise State 11-3 in the conference, 15-4. Colorado State 11-3 in the conference. Colorado State, if I said just Colorado, it's Colorado State. And then you see the Aztecs, and unfortunately, there it is. The Aztecs 9-3 in conference play. Overall, they've got a great record with 15 wins. But you wonder how that's going to come out to play because, is Mountain West going to get 2 teams in?
Yeah.
Hard to say.
Yeah. Exactly. And I really, obviously the Ivy League is not, but that's one bid. And once again, I don't think that that's the committee's going and looking for the third team in the Mountain West to fill the Ivy League spot, but we shall see. I think in that locker room for San Diego State, it's got to be pretty simple. What's next? Win that game. Everything from there on, it's very cliche, right? One game at a time, but
Right.
That's what you have to do. You can't overlook you can't overlook what Fresno State has the opportunity to do. It's a good team that knows San Diego State well. And Boise's the same way. If Boise goes out and beats San Diego State twice handily, that's another thing that might hurt them. And you talked about Utah State. I don't know the exact number, but they have quite a hefty win streak over the San Diego State Aztecs, something that hasn't really happened since pre-Kawhi Leonard days before then. So that is very interesting. But the Aztecs have to kind of finish this up. Just, dot your I's, cross your T's, and hopefully everything that is done, you're getting that call on Sunday, and we shall see how it all goes. But this could all be avoided if the Aztecs go and take care of business in the conference tournament. Once again, that's all the other thing too.
Controlling their own destiny to a degree. I mean,
everyone,
it's the same thing. If Utah State wins out, and of course, we don't want to see Boise State win out because that would mean they'd take care of business with the Aztecs. But Utah State runs it, then it's going to be. Then somebody, it seems to me, is in the position they have to win the Mountain West tournament to get in because Utah State's probably going to get in.
And that's a scary problem to get into a situation with a desperate team. You don't want to hungry dogs run faster. So
right.
Awesome. Well, Raider Jim, final thoughts for another fantastic episode of In the Paint.
No, again, I think it even took me by surprise. I knew March was right around the corner, but it is coming up on the end of February. So within 3 to 4 weeks here, we're going to start talking, hopefully, conference tournaments. Hopefully we see a lot of healthy teams and schedules back in order. And maybe next week when we talk, we'll have a little more clarity on how it looks like things are going to play out. Big 10, Big 12, how they're going to reschedule some of those games, even West Coast Conference.
Definitely. And hopefully that will be the only reason we talk about that because hopefully no one else will get either shut down or, no other games will be rescheduled. But there's plenty of hurdles to get through before we get, the next 5 weeks. I believe that's when we'll get rolling here on the big tournament, and that it's very, very needed. I brought it up plenty of times. Of all the major sports, with all due respect to maybe some of the other lesser sports, college basketball was the only one that didn't get to finish last year. So we're all really, really excited to fill out those brackets. We're a year into our withdrawal, so hopefully
Right.
everything will be taken care of. But
And we,
as always, Raider Jim, thank you very much.
one more thing.
Yes, definitely.
We went through the top 25, and there's a lot of teams we don't talk about right now. We aren't talking about the Bruins. We aren't talking about the Spartans. We aren't talking about the Blue Devils. But we'll talk about the Blue Devils, or I will, to end my piece of this program, and that is to wish Coach K a happy 74th birthday, which is today. So Coach K, if you happen to see us, happy birthday to you.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. Amen. Yeah. Happy birthday there, Coach K. What is it? 29, 30? No, I'm just kidding. But have a wonderful night. Thank you all so much for listening. Everybody watching on Facebook Live, thank you all very much. It is time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating, everybody. We will talk to you all next week.
Peace out, everybody.